Now to breaking news out of New York City. The judge presiding over the case of Nicolás Maduro said he will not approve the defense's motion to dismiss this case. The ousted Venezuelan leader and his wife were back in federal court last hour for the first time since their arraignment. Their lawyers were arguing that this indictment should be completely thrown out because the U.S. government is blocking the Maduro's ability to pay for counsel.
Now, meanwhile, crowds of pro and anti-Maduro protesters have been stationed outside the courtroom there in Lower Manhattan since this morning. Maduro and his wife were transported there under some intense security at around 4 a.m. NBC News correspondent Misty Marris joins us now. Misty, you're giving us the big picture. We've got reporters who are there, in Lower Manhattan now. Give us the context here. The judge ended the hearing saying that he'd set a date to make a decision about funding for Maduro's defense. Explain to us what happened there.
Right. So this hearing was a request by the defense to throw out the entire indictment because of violations of what they say were Maduro and his wife's Fifth Amendment right to due process, Sixth Amendment right to counsel, and fair trial. So what the court did, which was, I think, expected for most of us who are watching this from the legal perspective, is say that this is not enough to actually throw out the indictment. The question is whether or not Venezuelan funds from the country, can be used to pay for Maduro and his wife's defense. The defense wanted it to go a step further, not just get that money to pay for the defense, but also say that because the government was actually impeding that money from coming to the Maduros for the purpose of defending them in this case, it should be thrown out in its entirety because of constitutional violation. So the court said, no, the indictment stands, but we are going to have another hearing about this very complex issue of whether or not Venezuela should be able to foot the bill for the defense of Maduro and his wife.
Misty, so this motion is dismissed by the judge. For now, this means a trial is to come. Do we have a sense of when? And will the Maduros be held in custody until then?
They will be held in custody until then. They're held like anyone else who is held without bail in a proceeding in the SDNY at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. Now, there had been a trial schedule set, but that is in flux right now because there's going to be multiple other substantive challenges to this indictment. We obviously have a very complicated case, this being the first challenge to the indictment, which has now resulted in another procedural question about whether or not the funds will be allowed to pay for private counsel or whether Maduro and his wife will have to have assigned counsel, which would be from the assigned counsel panel. As you know, if you can't afford representation, an attorney will be assigned to defend you. So that's going to be the next question for this hearing. And I can't emphasize enough the complexity here, because the reason that these funds are not being released from Venezuela is because there are sanctions by the United States government. There has to be approvals and licenses through the Department of Treasury to even do business in any capacity with Maduro and his wife. So this is the next question before the court, whether or not they'll be able to retain the attorneys that they have hired or whether or not they will have to switch attorneys and be assigned defense counsel through the government.
There's a lot of questions facing the court, and there's a lot of feelings facing the people who have been standing outside that courthouse. Misty, I want to bring in Sam Brock here. Sam, you just came outside that courthouse. Describe to us what happened inside and what the feeling and just the spectacle is outside right now.
To answer your first question, there are hundreds, Morgan and Vicky, of news networks here, literally hundreds, lining the block where I'm standing and now set up over my shoulder in front of the courthouse, should we be hearing from the prosecutors or any of the defense attorneys in this case. So the interest is still incredibly high. As far as what happened inside of the court, the best way I could characterize this is sort of like a legal stalemate. Judge Hellerstein said he did not want to dismiss this case. It almost felt for a few moments like that's the direction that he was moving in, because the motion before him is dismissal, as Misty was just outlining, on the basis that Nicolás Maduro and his wife Celia Flores can't access the sovereign wealth fund of Venezuela, what the U.S. government has termed a slush fund, so to speak, for his defense. And the judge was empathetic to the idea. He used the word paramount that the most important issue in all of this is that Maduro and his wife have the rights to counsel, the Sixth Amendment, which the government then argued is flexible. Like all the case study on this, they were saying, is from domestic cases. This involves a government that is not only obviously not the United States government, but is under sanctions. So the judge said, what's my remedy? What can I do? And even asked the prosecutors in this case, do I have the ability to issue an order to the wing of the Treasury Department, the Foreign Assets Control section, to change the license so that they can, Maduro and his wife, access this foreign money? And basically the prosecutor was like, you don't. So what is the remedy? The remedy potentially is dismissal. Well, I'm not dismissing the case. Yeah. So that's why I use the term legal stalemate. I will also raise one other thing. It's like, what was the issue here in terms of accessing the money? Is it because of sanctions, as Misty was just describing? The judge points out, look, some of these sanctions have been lifted. Oil revenues are now flowing in for Venezuela, and the United States has a business relationship with Venezuela. And the human rights component of all of this, not to mention just the narco-terrorism charges, the judge said, well, look, we have a good relationship with the Venezuelan government right now. Delcy Rodriguez is in charge. I don't know that everyone in Venezuela would feel that way in terms of how that's characterized, certainly since you still have the same actors that were suppressing speech and taking government resources or potentially drug cocaine-fueled resources and depriving people from basic funds so that you could corrupt political and military institutions. If the argument the judge is sort of suggesting is that that's been resolved and now we have business as usual with Venezuela, what's the issue with sanctions? That would be kind of a shocking acknowledgement. He also mentioned the Strait of Hormuz and the oil crisis going on and the fact that the United States needs Venezuelan oil. I don't think he was trying to opine on the geopolitics of all this, but it was sort of incredible to hear these things mentioned within the framework of whether or not Nicolás Maduro should be able to access Venezuelan money. The other thing is this idea of tainted versus untainted funds, and that how do you prove that the money that he would be using for his defense came from drug revenues versus anything else? And Barry Pollock, who is representing Maduro, said, look, they've made $18 billion in revenues since this case started in Venezuela. You're not going to say that's tainted money. So these are sort of the back and forth that are going on over whether or not they should be allowed to access the Venezuelan funding. And then the other huge issue hanging in all of this is how much money does Nicolás Maduro and his wife, how much do they actually have access to of their personal funds? The judge wanted to know. It feels like that's really important. And the government said, we got to institute a fact-finding mission on this. We basically don't really know.
They didn't have a dollar amount,
he personally has. Yes.
Sam, multiple factors
they did not provide a dollar amount.
Yeah, multiple factors at play. We were just watching some live pictures of the Maduros leaving the courthouse. I do want to ask you about the scene outside. You mentioned hundreds of media organizations, but also are people showing up to watch this case? Are people demonstrating on behalf of the Maduros or against them?
Sure, both. I would say, so you have people that are saying American imperialism, free Nicolás Maduro, free Celia Flores. Are they saying that because they think they're innocent and not bad actors on the world stage, or are they saying that because they object to U.S. policy and the decision to carry out an operation that was borderline unprecedented to remove Maduro and his wife from the presidential palace in Caracas under the cover of night, which somehow resulted in no American fatalities and extricated this dictator from a country that is now in some sort of a relationship with the United States? I don't know how to characterize it, but you have those folks, and then you have those that think that Maduro should be facing justice for what's happened in Venezuela for the last quarter century or so. So two competing interests outside the courthouse.
And I think that's important to note. I mean, what you've just given context to, that it's not just what we're seeing legally play out in the courtroom, but the ripple effects culturally as we're facing this unprecedented moment in American history and our posture towards Latin America. And given just the sheer number of Latin Americans, people of Latin American descent who are coming here to watching to see what will happen to the countries that we come from as we watch this type of event play out in an American courtroom. It's truly historic and astonishing.
Sam Brock inside the courthouse. Misty Marris, as always, we appreciate your reporting and all of the insight that you provided. Thank you.